everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the English Learning Podcast, where we help you become a confident English speaker one step at a time. I'm Jason, your host, and today we're diving into a topic that can truly transform the way you approach learning English: how to set smart goals for your English learning journey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia, your co-host, and I'm super excited about today's topic. Setting goals might sound simple, but trust me, having the right kind of goals can make all the difference in how effectively you learn English.
Absolutely, Julia. You know, many English learners struggle because they don't have a clear plan. They often feel lost or unmotivated because their goals are too vague, like, I want to speak English fluently. But what does fluency really mean? How do you measure it?
Exactly, Jason. That's why we're going to talk about SMART goals today. Goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. These are not just buzzwords, they're a proven framework to help you succeed in learning English.
By the end of this episode, you'll know how to set goals that are not only realistic, but also powerful enough to keep you motivated and on track. So, grab a notebook if you can, and let's get started. So, Julia, let's start with the basics. What exactly are SMART goals? I think many of our listeners might have heard the term, but they might not fully understand what it means.
Great question, Jason. SMART is actually an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. These 5 elements are what make a goal clear, actionable, and more likely to succeed. Let's break each one down.
That sounds interesting. Can we start with the first one? Specific?
Of course, a goal needs to be specific, meaning it should be clear and detailed. For example, instead of saying, I want to improve my English, you could say, I want to learn 20 new vocabulary words related to travel. This gives you a clear focus.
I see. So, being specific helps you know exactly what you're working toward. What about measurable?
That's the second key. A goal should be measurable so you can track your progress. For instance, if your goal is to learn 20 words, you can easily measure if you've learned all 20 by the end of the week. It's like having a way to check if you're on the right path.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about achievable? I feel like this is where people might set themselves up for failure sometimes.
Exactly, Jason. A goal should be achievable, meaning it should challenge you but still be realistic. For example, saying, I want to become fluent in English in 1 month might be too ambitious. Instead, aim for something like, I want to be able to hold a simple conversation about daily activities in 1 month.
Got it. So, it's about finding the balance between challenging yourself and being realistic. What does relevant mean in this context?
Relevant means your goal should align with your overall learning purpose or needs. For example, if your main focus is improving speaking skills, your goal could be practice speaking English for 10 minutes every day. It wouldn't make sense to spend hours on grammar exercises if that's not your priority right now.
That's a great point. And the final one, time-bound?
This is super important. A time-bound goal has a deadline, which gives you a sense of urgency. For example, instead of saying, I'll learn new vocabulary, say, I'll learn 20 travel-related words by the end of this week. Deadlines keep you accountable and prevent procrastination.
So, to sum up, SMART goals are clear, trackable, realistic, focused on your needs, and tied to a deadline. Julia, do you think this framework can work for everyone, no matter their level of English?
Absolutely, Jason. Whether you're a beginner trying to master basic sentences or an advanced learner working on fluency, SMART goals can guide you. It's all about breaking your big dreams into manageable steps.
Perfect. I think this gives our listeners a solid understanding of SMART goals. Shall we talk about why they're so important for English learners next?
Yes, let's do that.
All right, Julia. Now that we know what SMART goals are, let's talk about why they're so important for learning English. I mean, can't people just study without setting formal goals?
Well, Jason, it's definitely possible to study without formal goals. But here's the thing. Without goals, you're more likely to lose focus, feel overwhelmed, or even give up. SMART goals act like a roadmap, showing you exactly where you're going and how to get there.
That's a great analogy, Julia. I imagine it's like trying to drive to a new place without a GPS. You might eventually get there, but it'll take longer and feel frustrating.
Exactly. And let's not forget the motivation factor. When you set SMART goals, you give yourself small wins to celebrate along the way. For example, if your goal is to learn 5 new English phrases for work, you can feel a sense of achievement when you've mastered them.
That makes sense. It's like those small wins keep you energized and excited to keep going.
Yes, and another reason SMART goals are important is that they help you track your progress. Learning a language can feel like a never-ending journey, but when you can measure what you've accomplished, it reminds you that you're moving forward, even if it's step by step.
That's so true. Sometimes learners feel like they're not improving because they don't see the progress they're making. Having measurable goals can really change that perspective.
And one more thing, Jason. SMART goals also help you stay realistic. Many learners quit because their goals are too vague or unrealistic. For example, saying, "I want to speak English fluently in 1 month," can be discouraging when it doesn't happen. But with SMART goals, you're setting smaller, achievable steps, which keeps you motivated and confident.
That's a great point, Julia. It's all about setting yourself up for success instead of frustration. Would you say that SMART goals also make learning more efficient?
Absolutely. When you have clear and specific goals, you know exactly what to focus on. Instead of wasting time on random activities, you're spending your energy on things that actually matter for your progress.
So, in a nutshell, SMART goals keep you focused, motivated, realistic, and efficient in your learning journey. That's pretty powerful.
It really is, Jason. I hope our listeners are starting to see how this approach can transform the way they learn English.
Definitely. Now, let's move on to the next part. How to create SMART English goals step by step.
Sounds great.
All right, Julia. Now that we know why SMART goals are important, let's dive into the practical part. How can our listeners create their own SMART English goals?
Great question, Jason. Creating SMART goals is simpler than it sounds. It's all about following a step-by-step process. Let's walk through it together.
Perfect. Where should they start?
Step 1 is to identify what you want to achieve. Think about what's most important to you in learning English. For example, do you want to improve your speaking, expand your vocabulary, or master grammar rules? Start with a clear focus.
So, instead of saying, "I want to learn English," you might say, "I want to improve my speaking skills so I can have better conversations at work."
Exactly, Jason. That brings us to step 2. Make your goal specific. Instead of saying improve speaking skills, say practice speaking English for 15 minutes every day using a language app or with a partner.
I like that. Specific goals feel more actionable. What's next?
Step 3 is to make it measurable. Add a way to track your progress. For example, instead of saying learn new vocabulary, say learn 10 new business-related words every week and review them using flashcards.
I see. Measurable goals give you a way to check if you're on track. What about making them achievable?
That's step 4. Make sure your goal is realistic. Think about your time, resources, and current skill level. If you only have 20 minutes a day to study, don't set a goal to read an entire English novel in a week. Instead, aim for something like read 1 page of an English book every evening.
That's a great tip, Julia. Unrealistic goals can make you feel discouraged if you can't reach them. What about relevance?
Step 5 is to make your goal relevant. Ask yourself, does this goal help me achieve my bigger learning objectives? For example, if your main focus is speaking, then practicing listening or writing might not be the best use of your time right now.
That's an important point. Staying relevant keeps you focused on what truly matters. And the last step?
Step 6 is to set a deadline. Make it time-bound. A goal without a timeline can lose its urgency. For instance, instead of saying, "I'll practice listening," say, "I'll listen to one English podcast episode every day for the next 2 weeks."
So, to sum up, listeners should identify their focus, make the goal specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and give it a deadline. Could you share a full example of a SMART goal, Julia?
Sure, here's one. I want to improve my English vocabulary by learning 15 new words related to travel within the next 7 days. I'll use flashcards to review these words daily and quiz myself at the end of the week.
That's a perfect example. It's clear, trackable, realistic, relevant, and has a deadline.
Exactly. And listeners can adapt this process to fit their personal goals, whether it's speaking, listening, reading, or writing.
This is super helpful, Julia. Coming up next, we'll share some practical examples of SMART English goals to inspire our listeners.
I can't wait to dive into those.
All right, Julia. Now that we've covered how to create SMART goals, let's share some practical examples to inspire our listeners.
Great idea, Jason. Examples can really help make this concept clear. Let's start with a beginner-friendly goal.
Okay, how about this one? I want to learn 10 common English greetings and practice using them in sentences every day for the next week.
That's a fantastic example for beginners. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Exactly. Now, how about an example for someone who wants to improve their listening skills?
Sure. Here's one. I will listen to one English podcast episode every day for the next 2 weeks and write down 3 new words or phrases from each episode.
I love that one, Julia. It's not only about listening, but also about expanding vocabulary. Let's try an example for speaking practice.
Okay, here's one. I will record myself speaking for 2 minutes every day on a topic I enjoy, like hobbies or work, for the next 30 days, and review the recordings to improve my pronunciation.
That's excellent. It's such a practical way to build confidence and track progress. Let's do one more. Maybe for someone focusing on reading.
Good idea. Here's a reading-focused goal. I will read one short English article or story every day and write a summary in 2 to 3 sentences for the next month.
That's perfect. It combines reading and writing, which is a great way to reinforce learning.
Absolutely, Jason. I hope these examples show our listeners that SMART goals can be applied to all aspects of English learning.
I think they will, Julia. Now, let's move on to some tips for staying consistent and motivated when working toward the... All right, Julia, let's talk about something every English learner faces: challenges. Setting SMART goals is great, but what happens when life gets in the way or progress feels slow?
That's a really important topic, Jason. Challenges are part of the process, but the good news is there are strategies to overcome them. Let's break it down.
Okay, let's start with the challenge of staying consistent. A lot of people struggle to follow through on their goals.
That's true, Jason. One way to stay consistent is to make English practice a part of your daily routine. For example, tie it to something you already do, like practicing vocabulary during your morning coffee or listening to a podcast while commuting.
Great tip! Another challenge is feeling overwhelmed, especially if the goal seems too big or progress feels slow.
Yes, that can be discouraging. The key here is to break big goals into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of saying, I'll learn 100 new words, focus on learning 5 words a day. Small wins can keep you motivated.
Absolutely. Small steps make a big difference over time. What about the fear of making mistakes? That's something I hear a lot from learners.
Oh, definitely. Many learners hesitate because they don't want to say the wrong thing. But here's the truth. Mistakes are part of learning. Instead of fearing them, treat them as opportunities to improve. Surround yourself with supportive people, like language partners or teachers, who can guide you.
That's such good advice, Julia. And finally, let's talk about the challenge of losing motivation. What can learners do to stay inspired?
Great question, Jason. One way is to remind yourself of your why. Why do you want to learn English? Is it for career growth, travel, or connecting with new people? Keeping that reason in mind can reignite your motivation.
I love that. It's all about keeping your eyes on the bigger picture.
Exactly. And don't forget to celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Rewarding yourself for reaching milestones can make the journey enjoyable.
That's such a positive approach, Julia. Challenges are inevitable, but with the right mindset and strategies, they don't have to stop you.
Absolutely, Jason. Now, let's wrap things up by sharing some final thoughts for.
All right, Julia. Before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with some actionable steps they can take right now to start working toward their smart English goals.
Absolutely, Jason. First, take a few minutes today to write down one SMART goal for your English learning. Use the tips we've shared to make it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
And don't stop there. Share your goal with a friend, family member, or even in the comments below this video. Accountability can make a huge difference in sticking to your goals.
That's a great idea, Jason. Also, keep track of your progress. Use a notebook, an app, or even sticky notes to monitor your daily or weekly achievements.
And if you're looking for resources to help you, don't forget to check out our playlist, where we cover topics like improving your speaking, listening, and writing skills.
Yes, and remember, consistency is key. Even small efforts every day will add up over time.
So, listeners, what's your first SMART goal going to be? Let us know in the comments, and we'll be here to support you every step of the way.
And if you found this podcast helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us reach more learners like you.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode.
Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.